the fight for rights.
Shaina's mother was explaining to her about civil rights. She said that it's a little hard to imagine, but in the southern states in the USA till the 1960s, African Americans were denied many civil rights. They could not even drink from the same water fountain as the whites.
How is that possible?
You see, from the 1500s to the 1700s, Africans were brought to the Americas as slaves. They were forced to work on the plantations or as servants and were not given any money in return. They were especially used as laborers in the southern states of the USA, where agriculture was more important. They were treated as personal property. The children of the slaves were also passed on as slaves of the owners. But things changed in the 1860s. There was a civil war between the North and the South of the country. The North came out as the winner, and President Abraham Lincoln finally abolished slavery in 1865. So the whites and the African Americans lived equally. But Shaina, this was not the end of it. The whites in the southern states were forced to accept this proclamation that abolished slavery. However, they didn't approve of it. Treating the African Americans equally would mean that they'd have to share wealth, power, and control with people who were formerly slaves. So once the Southerners became strong again after the war, they started passing the Jim Crow laws between 1876 to 1965. According to these laws, the African Americans were treated on a separate but equal basis. For example, African Americans could go to school, but not to the same ones as the whites. There were separate schools for the African Americans, and their provisions were not good. They read from hand-me-down books, had bad furniture, and no properly trained teachers. Most restaurants didn't even allow African Americans to eat in the same place as the whites. They had separate movie theaters, game rooms, etc. This separation of people on the basis of skin color or any other factor is known as segregation.
But this is not the case now. So what changed?
Rosa Parks happened. Down in the south, there was this rule in the buses. The front part of the buses was reserved for the whites, and the African Americans could only sit in the back rows right after the middle of the bus. If the front seats were full, then the bus driver could ask the African Americans to give their seats to the white passengers. And if anyone refused, they would be punished for breaking the Jim Crow laws. On 1st December 1955, a tired 42-year-old African-American seamstress, Rosa Parks, refused to give up her seat in the black or colored section in Montgomery, Alabama. She was arrested. However, she was a secretary of the Montgomery chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Her arrest was reported in the news and on radio. A few days later, plans were made to boycott the buses until African Americans were treated with the same courtesy as the white passengers, or even hired as drivers.
So were the rules changed?
It was a year-long struggle. African Americans refused to use the buses for a year. The bus company lost a lot of money. And in the course of the boycott, a young leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., joined the boycott and encouraged it. There was a lot of publicity. Finally, a year later, in 1956, the buses were integrated. That means segregation was stopped in Montgomery buses. Rosa Parks' defiance started an African American civil rights movement, which led to the passing of an act in 1964 by President Lyndon Johnson. It banned discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin in employment practices and public accommodations. But the real victory was won in 1965 when the African Americans were given equal voting rights as the whites. There were thousands of people who were part of the African American civil rights movement. It took them almost a decade to win equal rights. People boycotted lunch bars, even churches. And remember, segregation had to be fought against even in the schools.